We are Kimberly and Lyle Wick, both licensed marriage and family therapists, mother and daughter.
We have been in the trenches with family addiction and are now passionate about helping others heal and be their best selves.
Hi everyone, I'm Lyle.
And I'm Kimberly. We want to just take a brief second to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to talk about boundaries. We started Healing Family Addiction because both Lyle and I have been in the trenches with family addiction ourselves, and we've come through on the other side. We're both therapists, and we are passionate about helping people who are in the trenches with family addiction understand that this is a family disease.
Today, we're going to talk about codependency, and we'll give some insight into how that showed up in our lives, and then also share with you, how do you set boundaries? How do you do things to help you get out of codependency? And especially when you're in the cycle of addiction in your family, this codependency can show up so intensely, and it can be helpful to have some tools so that you aren't feeling like your head's spinning and you're losing yourself in the process.
Exactly. And if you guys have ever felt like you're stuck in this cycle where you're constantly annoyed with your loved one, and it could be any gender. So I just want to say that up front because we get so many comments about it's not just women, and that is absolutely correct. This is a family dynamic that happens. But if you're feeling like you're stuck in this, feeling annoyed with your loved one, feeling triggered by them, putting yourself on the back burner, having resentments, then this discussion is going to be amazing for you, because I want you to know that I was exactly in that place with my late ex-husband. It's challenging to hear breaking the cycle of codependency. You must figure out what your part is in it to feel empowered, because when we start to focus on ourselves and what our part is, we are no longer being victims of this cycle. We are reclaiming our power, and we're starting to look at what our part is, and then we can grow from that.
So, how codependency shows up in your behaviors, especially when you are in a family with addiction, can be walking on eggshells. So, taking someone else's temperature to take your own, trying to get a gauge on their mood and how they are to determine how you're going to act and how you're going to engage with them and if you're okay. I know this was so true for me in my family with addiction, where I had a lot of codependency with my mom and my dad. And so I would walk into a room, just as an example, trying to determine, what mood are you in? Because that's going to change how I act in this situation. And so I was giving myself to do what I felt was accommodating to them. And in this, you lose yourself, because I wasn't putting my own needs first. I wasn't advocating for myself. I wasn't speaking my truth. I was molding to be who I felt my parents needed me to be in that moment.
And I just want to say one quick thing to that, because when we are behaving like that, we're actually servicing our own anxiety. The emotion that's coming up is trepidation, fear, anxiety, or just a discomfort. And then we're not grounded, because we are making these behavioral choices based on servicing feeling better.
Absolutely. And it's all fear-based, because we are, one, trying to control an outcome, and two, in fear of the unknown. So things we're powerless over, someone else's response or how they may engage with you. It's at the cost of ourselves. And so unfortunately with this, it is normal to leave someone, and I felt this way, really resentful. They're having this reaction towards me, or why aren't I good enough for them? Why isn't this good enough for them?
Okay, so we're going to give you 3 actionable steps that you can think about, how they apply to you, and how you can implement them into your life. The first one is really take a look at your part. That means that you need to understand what you can control. We cannot control people, places, and things. Whatever your part is in a situation, and maybe it's that you aren't doing anything, maybe that's your part, because some people say, well, I'm so kind, like I don't really have a part. But in Al-Anon, they call it being a doormat. So maybe your part is that you're just not doing anything, which means that you're in full enabling swing. But understanding what your part is in your own personal dynamic with your loved one, setting boundaries, which you need to know what your needs are and how to set them and how how to language them when you set them, and then up your own self-care. And we can go one at a time just to give you guys some very fluid action steps so that you will be able to take these 3 things and implement them into your own life. In terms of looking at what your own part is, it might feel challenging to really deconstruct that and to really understand what is my part in this relationship dynamic. One thing that I started to use early on that was really, really helpful to get me emotionally organized is I would take out a piece of paper and I would fold it in half and I would just list all of the things that were on my mind about my loved one. And believe me, sometimes there might be half a page and other times there might be 2 pages. And then I would go through the list and I would cross out people, places, or things. So things I essentially cannot control. That was really challenging for me because I was resistant. I was resistant to letting go of the things that I could not control because my late ex-husband's behavior was so challenging and I saw it impacting my kids. So the idea that I couldn't control that was very hard for me. But what this exercise helped me to do is that all of a sudden I focused on what can I control? Oh, I can control getting my kids physically out of the situation. I can control setting boundaries around things that might happen at dinner time. I can control how often I am going out to social outings with him when I know he's going to be drinking, and on and on and on. So once you start to get the rhythm down on this little exercise of the can control, can't control column, then you take all the things that are left on that column and you start to make an action plan for that. So if you're having anxiety around his behavior when he comes home and the kids, it's late afternoon, almost dinner time, and maybe he pulls up or she pulls up and you have some anxiety around that the kids are having a great time and the house is a little messy. What might you do instead of running around to get the house picked up, focus on servicing your anxiety? Well, maybe you just continue to let the house be exactly how it is. And when he walks in, you say, "Hi, sweetheart, how are you?" And if he says a grumbly thing, then you have the language skill set to say, "It's hard for me to hear you say that." Or there's a different kind of boundary that you set. Or maybe it's a conversation when the kids aren't present that, "Look, when you come home, I've been walking on eggshells. And so I want you to know in advance, this is how I'm going to respond when I hear you say that." And especially in front of the kids. And it may be that also you get some support in playing this out. But these are our thoughts in terms of just the beginnings of focusing on what you can control as a way to help you get clarity around owning your part.
Yeah, definitely. And the only thing I would add to that is this is such an important process and exercise in identifying what your part is, your role, and gaining that self-awareness of being onto yourself. So as you have it visually, oh, this is what I can control, that's what I'm powerless over, it can come more into your consciousness as you're moving through the day, not just when you're writing. And that is so valuable because when we get to be onto ourselves and catch ourselves in the moment, we get to change how we're interacting in that dynamic.
Exactly. That is so true. And both of us have had to practice these things ad nauseum. And the beauty in all of this is that once you start to realize that this is even an option for you, it's a game changer because there's so much emotional growth that happens when we start to make shifts and small shifts that add up to big changes.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about setting boundaries. And this can be so challenging. I know when I started working on setting boundaries, I was so uncomfortable because for so long I was engaged in what I'm sure everyone's heard, people pleasing, being the yes person, accommodating others. When I started to put my needs first and learn how to ask for what I need, it was a game changer. And so there are a lot of different tools and ways to set boundaries that are helpful. We're going to give you one today that's really simple in theory. To apply it can feel uncomfortable and you got to exercise that muscle. So every time you practice setting a boundary, it's going to get easier and easier and you're going to gain confidence. What I like to do is start with the moment. If you're having a conversation and you're hearing your partner talking or your loved one talking, pausing, listening, saying, "Okay, I'm hearing you're saying saying blank. So reflecting what they're saying, filling in the blank. And we use and because when we say but, it can create a feeling of invalidation, right?
Yes, it negates everything that you just put out there.
Exactly. So we don't want to negate anything. We want to do an and. There's a second part to that. And I'm needing blank, or this is what feels comfortable for me. Blank. Fill in what's comfortable for you, fill in your limit. So this in full as an example would be, hey mom, I'm hearing that you're telling me that I need to clean my room and I am not feeling well and I need to do it later. So that's a really, really basic example, but it's a full sentence. You're stating what you're needing and you're expressing that you hear them.
Dealing with your alcoholic partner, and we'll use the example that I gave because that actually happened to me when my late ex-husband Lyle's dad would come home, and if Lyle and Sally were running around the house and we hadn't gotten to homework yet and it had been a busy afternoon, I always anticipated his mood when he would pull up and come in. Setting a boundary would be a language boundary, which looks like, I'm hearing that it's hard for you, that the kids are not sitting down and doing their homework. We've had a really busy afternoon. Why don't you just go and get dressed and I'll let you know when we're all ready for dinner. So it doesn't have to be like some big thing. It can be more subtle. You'll find your own style in it. And because every moment is different, you will, I promise you that you will find your own style in it, but you've got to just trust your instincts. If it's feels very, very challenging and you're absolutely not sure what to do, statements like, it's hard for me when you come home and say that, or it's hard for me to hear that, or I have to take a moment to think about this. Things that provide that boundary right there, because you're just giving your feelings a language, but you're not servicing your anxiety, which is the number one thing. The last thing that we want to talk to you about today is self-care. And that term gets overused so much today in our society. But the reason that we feel it is vital to take care of yourself is because along with addiction or mental health, in the family system comes trauma. I ended up with an autoimmune disease after years and years of all of the chaos and trauma. I got Hashimoto's, and I am a big advocate today of people putting their self-care first. If something has to give, do not let it be you, because not only are you providing an excellent example for your loved ones that they are entitled to take care of themselves, you're taking care of yourself is giving yourself the oxygen mask first. And things with understanding your part, learning how to set boundaries. Think of self-care as like the foundation that's going to allow you to springboard. Once you're taking self-care seriously, you're likely to be a whole lot less resentful in situations where under other circumstances you feel like you're putting yourself on the back burner. When you are having solid self-care, you feel more entitled to owning your space, to setting those boundaries. It's just like we don't have to end up compromising our physical well-being, ultimately our emotional well-being. So don't end up with anything that you don't have to get. Take good care of yourselves.
And I think I just wanted to add to that, because self-care is so discussed in this day and age. It's really important to identify that to do self-care doesn't mean you have to go run a marathon. It can start really small, baby steps. It can start with taking a shower in the morning. It can start with making your bed every day. If these are things you find you don't get to or that feel too big, whatever it may be, something really small. It can even be doing a meditation for 1 minute. You know, this idea of, okay, I have to do 1 minute, all or nothing. If you miss a day, do it the next day. It's okay. Nothing has to be perfect. And this is such a great exposure to that. But to make time for you, even if it's 30 seconds, and build on that.
I'm so glad you said that, because self-care is different for everyone. And we all have different situations, different physical limitations. Self-care can even be getting into bed at night and listening to a 5-minute meditation. But whatever it is, if it's intentional, it will feel like self-care.
Okay, so thank you guys for listening. We hope this helped you. If this resonates and you would like more support support, we have a freebie on our website that is on breaking codependency, and it's a guide to doing this. So please download it if it's something that's going to help you. Our website's www.healingfamilyaddiction.com.
Healthy boundaries aren't about shutting someone out. They're about protecting your peace while showing love and respect.